really confusing. Okay. Alright, I think I'm live. So basically today we're going to be talking about getting rid of weeds, as the title says. I got a few little notes, and hopefully the audio is going to be good, considering you probably heard that. But so no one's on at the point, or right now, which I don't think anyone will really join, which is kind of the point. It's not really as a live thing, considering this is late. It's not my upload schedule and anything, but you can watch at any time. With my notes again. So basically, weeds. How are we gonna get rid of them? And all of that, because we all know they're a big problem in gardening, and which is why many people don't garden at all, which should not be the case. Now, when normally talking about this subject, I would say mulch, which I'm gonna use because I think it's one of the greatest ways to start out with for getting rid of weeds. We will still have some, but it will majorly help you. And what am I talking about? Like, when I mean mulch, I'm not really talking about rocks and stuff. I mean more organic sources mulch, which ultimately are better than rocks and stuff, because we all know weeds go right through them. So yeah, basically I'm saying like leaves and dead organic matter of other things, which is pretty normal and stuff, and I think it's very important. I typically use a few inches of that mulch, and I think it's one of the main reasons why my raised garden beds aren't totally filled with weeds, but you still will have some weeds, and there's nothing we can do about it, which is why there's other methods, of course. You can use like a plastic tarp thing, which would work. I have not used it, but I think it's a pretty good idea, considering it blocks out all light and stuff, or at least most of it, and it covers the plants. You typically will like have rocks or bricks on the ends of it and stuff, so it doesn't blow away, from what I've seen of other people using it, and I've heard it really works. So I might have to use it, but that's mainly also something that you use in the winter or times of years when you're not using your raised beds. But you can also use it when you're using them and just like have it all around your plants that are actually growing, which I think that's probably the best way to use it, and probably have that on top of your mulch, so to add another layer, which I think would be very helpful. Also, you can use plastic stuff similar to tarps, but tarps I like because they're multi-use and you can use them anywhere. You can bring them anywhere around the garden. But I like the tarps much better because plastic, number one, it's plastic. It's most of the time it's like single use and everything. There are some that are multi-use that maybe you could use them, and I've seen you just like poke a hole right through there where you put them in your plant, and you have to deal with way less weeds, or like none at all, which would be very interesting. I have yet to try that, but it's not really necessary when you can use other things like tarps again. But also, sometimes with weeds, you just have to spend the time weeding them. It might seem obvious, but sometimes we just have to do it when we don't. Now, this can be whenever you like walk through a garden, that you will take out a few plants or something like that. And I think that would be very helpful, because it does add up and it delays the fact of your garden being completely covered in weeds, which did accidentally happen when I left for like 5 days. It all happens at some points, and we can't we sometimes can't do it and stuff. So that's why there are other options, but we have to spend the time, no matter what, at some point in time, to weed the plants. It's pretty important. Now, we can also use alarm, well, more like times of like the day. We like set times of the day. We can have it set on our phone that like we will weed the garden for like 5 minutes at this point in time. And I think that's one way that you could do it. I haven't done it, but I think it's definitely will help if you have that kind of problem. And I've heard other people use that, and that does help. All of these example things have proof of some sort that it does work and that you don't really use one of them, you use them all combined. And like some things you might not use them, like the plastic stuff, but we kind of use like the rest all combined to try and make sure the garden isn't completely covered in weeds, which is the kind of the definitely, yeah, it's not really what you want at all, and I think that's pretty obvious. No one wants that to happen. So yeah, you can do like 5 minutes a day. You can do it like set 5 minute alarms for multiple times a day. You can do it for longer. You can do it in the morning or night. Where in the summer, it's way nicer outside than in the burning heat. You can also use, like, this is similar to like the tarp when you're not using it, when you're not using the plants or the space in the garden at that point in time. Cover crops. Cover crops are very useful. I don't really have them at the moment, but I have some, in essence, that it's not really, it's like more like when you have cover crops outside of the garden that you then every year you cut down and use them as mulch, which is one of the main points of cover crops too. But it also takes a space, and then you might think, all right, it's just like a weed, but it can be a lot better considering some actually help bring nitrogen from the air into the soil. Some they're just like way better than weeds, and just in total it helps the environment, it helps everything in your garden, and you have mulch to then help prevent more weeds after the cover crops are done, and you have vegetables in there. And I think that's one important thing. You can also use, similar to cover crops, but ground cover. Ground cover is more of something that you have in like when there's actually plants that you want in there still growing. Just at the bottom, there's several different like choices for that, but I can't come up like any right now. But they just go around the base by the mulch with like big foliage and leaves at just the base, when you can have other things that grow way higher. You have like your normal plants, they'll grow like in this range, while your cover crops are more like down here at the mulch. And sometimes those cover crops can actually be more food crops that have more potential, but they don't get crowded with weeds as much, which is like another thing. You can have plants specifically put there so that you don't have as many weeds, even though they're still a nice food crop that you want to have. Some plants are just better at maintaining like shade over the ground, that so that less weeds will actually grow. We of course want to use several different things to make sure that you still will have the least amount of weeds as possible, but I think that's one important thing that you can do. One of the big things is just, like I said, you use all of these things figure out what works best for your garden and what works best for you in the time of that. We covered all of these different things: mulch, tarp, plastic, just spending the time, alarms, all of that, cover crops, ground cover, all these things, and we should all use them. Like, just figure out what one works best for us and what several types work best for us, and the gardens and this microclimate and stuff that you actually have, which I think is a pretty important thing. And pretty short live stream, but I think we're gonna end it about now, as we covered all these things.